The night was quiet again on New Elysium. The fires of war had cooled, the scars still fresh but healing. The colony was rebuilding, stronger, smarter, united. And at the heart of it stood two figures, the human and the alien who had defied empires. Elias Rook stood by the lake, his reflection rippling across the water. Behind him, Kareth approached silently. She no longer wore chains or the torn armor of her past. Instead, she bore a new symbol on her shoulder, a combined crest of humanity and Vraxia intertwined. "The Council has sent for me," she said quietly. Elias turned, his mechanical arm glinting faintly. "You're leaving?" "For a time," she replied. "They want me to represent both our worlds, to speak for peace between our species." He studied her face. She was no longer the proud cold warrior he'd first met. There was warmth in her now, humanity, and if they don't listen, he asked, her lips curved, "then I'll make them." The Council of Worlds, the Galactic Council chamber stretched miles wide, built from shimmering crystal and ancient alloys. Delegates from 100 races filled the tiers, their voices echoing like a storm. At the center, the human ambassador, Admiral Sarah Holt, stood beside Kareth. Cameras, drones, and holofeeds broadcast the event across known space. Kareth felt thousands of alien eyes upon her, some filled with curiosity, others with hatred. "The widow of Vraxia," a reptilian delegate hissed. "Murderer, you dare walk here unshackled?" "I do," she replied calmly. "Because I am not here as a weapon. I am here as proof that enemies can become allies." The murmurs rippled like waves. Admiral Holt stepped forward. "Kareth Rook is living evidence of the change we seek. Humanity does not demand vengeance for her crimes. We offer something rarer, trust." A Vraxian general rose from the lower dais, armor gleaming like polished obsidian. His name was Vorkal, Torak's brother. "My sibling died by your hand," he growled. "And you think peace will erase that?" Kareth looked him in the eye. "No, but understanding might prevent others from dying the same way." Her voice resonated through the chamber. "We can keep fighting until the stars themselves burn out. Or we can try something different. We can learn." For a long, tense moment, no one spoke. Then slowly the delegates began to murmur in agreement. The council called for a vote. And when the results came, it was unanimous. The Vraxian-Human Accord of Unity, signed by both sides, with Kareth Rook as the first ambassador of reconciliation. A new journey months passed. Kareth traveled across worlds, Earth, Mars, Titan, even the remains of Vraxia Prime. Everywhere she went, she saw the echoes of war and the beginnings of hope. Children waved when she arrived on human ships. Soldiers saluted. Even alien officers bowed in respect. On one world, a young Vraxian girl asked her, "Is it true, widow, that you once hated humans?" Kareth smiled gently. "Yes, but I learned something from them." "What?" the child asked, eyes wide. "That compassion can be stronger than fear." Back on New Elysium, Elias continued rebuilding the colony. His mechanical arm became the heart of the new energy grid. His leadership inspired hundreds of settlers. Every night he looked up at the stars, wondering where she was and hoping she was safe. Then one evening, the stars flickered with an incoming transmission. Her face appeared on the hollow screen. Faintly smiling, "Elias," she said softly, "I'm coming home." Returned to the lake, the shuttle landed on the lakeshore at dawn. The air was crisp, and the morning mist rolled off the water like silver threads. Kareth stepped out, her long cloak trailing behind her. Elias stood waiting, older now, the edges of his beard flecked with gray. When their eyes met, neither spoke. He simply opened his arms and she walked into them. "I missed you," he said quietly. "I missed you more," she whispered. "The stars are colder without you," he chuckled. "That's poetic, coming from a warlord." "I was," she corrected gently. "Now I am something else." "What's that?" "Yours. The widow's legacy piece rarely lasts forever." Even as the accord held, darker forces stirred in the outer systems. A splinter faction of Vraxians, led by zealots who still worshipped conquest, began attacking trade convoys. Kareth was summoned once again, not as a prisoner, but as a commander. She stood before the human admiralty, her gaze steady. "Let me go. They are my people. If they see me standing beside humanity, they might surrender," Elias protested. "You've done enough. Let the fleet handle it." She turned to him, placing a hand over his chest. If I don't go, more will die. You taught me that peace is built by action, not words. He looked into her eyes and saw the same fire he'd fallen in love with, the fire that no war could extinguish. Come back to me, he said. She smiled faintly. Always. The final confrontation. The rogue Vraxian fleet assembled near the dying star of Uranus. Their ships were sleek and brutal, painted in the crimson banners of the old empire. Kareth's ship, the Aurora's Edge, emerged from hyperspace flanked by Terran cruisers. "Transmit open frequency," she ordered. Her voice echoed across the system. "This is Kareth Rook, once of Vraxia Prime. The war is over. Lay down your weapons and return home." The enemy fleet hesitated. Then a single ship broke formation. A voice answered, a young female, trembling but fierce. "You betrayed us, Widow. You kneel to humans." Kareth closed her eyes. "No, I stand with them, because they stood with me when no one else did." The silence that followed was heavy. Then slowly, one by one, ships began to power down. The rebellion ended without bloodshed. The gift. When Kareth returned to New Elysium, the entire colony gathered at the landing site. Children held flowers. Banners fluttered in the wind. Elias pushed through the crowd, his eyes bright with pride. "You did it," he said as she descended the ramp. "We did," she corrected. Smiling, he reached into his pocket and held up a small silver pendant, the same one she had carried for years. "I had it reforged," he said softly, "into something new." Inside the pendant was a hologram, an image of the two of them standing by the lake, side by side beneath the stars. Her eyes shimmered. "You kept it?" he smiled. "I keep everything that matters." A universe reborn years passed. The widow of Vraxia became a legend, not as a destroyer but as a builder. Under her guidance, the Human-Vraxian alliance expanded to dozens of worlds. Trade, culture, even intermarriage between species flourished. Elias and Kareth built a home overlooking the same lake where they'd first met. Visitors came from across the galaxy just to glimpse the couple whose love had rewritten history. One day, as they sat beneath the twilight sky, Elias pointed upward. "See that star?" Kareth nodded. "That's Uranus, where you ended the last battle." She smiled softly. "Then let it be remembered not for war, but for the day an empire chose peace." He leaned back, watching her silhouette against the horizon. "You ever think how crazy this all is? You, an alien warlord. Me, a broken soldier. And somehow we saved the galaxy." Kareth chuckled quietly. "The galaxy was never ours to save. We just reminded it how to care." The final promise as the years stretched on, Elias grew older. His hair turned white, his movements slower. Kareth, ageless by comparison, stayed by his side every step of the way. One evening, as the twin moons rose above the lake, Elias rested against her shoulder. "I don't have much time left," he said softly. She took his hand gently. "Humans live fast, but they love deeper than any race I have ever known." He smiled faintly. "When I go, promise me one thing. Anything. Don't go back to being the widow." Kareth's eyes glistened. "Never. You freed me from that name." He squeezed her hand weakly. "Good. Then let the galaxy remember you not as a conqueror, but as the woman who turned hate into hope." And with that, Elias Rook, the man who'd once lost everything, took his final breath beneath the alien stars. Epilogue. The human's treasure, years later. On the anniversary of his death, Kareth stood once more by the lake. The colony had grown into a city, its lights glimmering across the water like a sea of stars. In her hands, she held a small box. Inside it, the pendant Elias had given her. She pressed it to her chest. "My treasure," she whispered. Then she turned her gaze skyward. "You once told me humans never die." "Not truly, because their stories live on." She smiled through her tears. "Then live forever, my human. In me, in them, in every world we touched." As the wind swept across the lake, Kareth's cloak fluttered like wings. Above her, a new constellation shimmered, a sword and a heart entwined. They called it the Widow's Promise. And across the stars, both human and Vraxian children grew up hearing her story. Of the alien sentenced to serve a human, who became his greatest treasure and the galaxy's greatest hope. The embers still smoldered from the wreckage that rained across the night sky. Smoke curled lazily above the lake as New Elysium's colonists picked through debris and ashes. Kareth stood on a ridge overlooking the valley, her once pristine silver hair streaked with soot. The alien armor she'd cobbled together from scavenged drones was cracked and scorched, but her crimson eyes burned brighter than ever. Behind her, Elias limped up the slope, his rifle slung across his back. His mechanical arm twitched with static, the servos clicking faintly in the dawn chill. "They'll be back," she said softly, without turning. He nodded grimly. "I know." The Vraxian warship had been destroyed, but not before sending a final burst transmission. Somewhere out there, more of her people knew she had survived, and that she'd fought against them. For the Vraxian Empire, that wasn't defiance. That was treason. The gathering storm by midday, Elias had gathered the colony council in the old comms bunker. The holotable flickered with faint blue light, displaying orbital patterns, power grids, and defense lines. "We've got 2 weeks, maybe less," Elias said, pointing at the map. "They'll send more ships once they decrypt the last transmission." A woman named Dr. Lin Wei, the settlement's engineer, frowned. "Our defense grid barely handled 1 cruiser. We can't stop a fleet." Kareth stepped forward, her shadow falling across the table. "You cannot win by human weapons alone," she said. "But I can help." The council exchanged wary looks. "You?" Lin asked. "The same alien who led the war that killed half our colonies?" Kareth didn't flinch. "Yes, and the same one who destroyed the fleet that came to finish the job." Elias leaned against the console. "She's right. We either trust her or we die together." Silence fell. Then Lin sighed. "All right, Widow, what do you need?" Kareth's mouth curved into a grim smile. "A forge, a power core, and a promise that when the time comes, you will not hesitate to fight." The forging of redemption over the next week, the colony transformed into a fortress. Kareth's knowledge of alien engineering was unmatched. She rewired the damaged defense satellites into kinetic rail platforms, reforged mining drills into plasma cannons, and turned atmospheric probes into improvised missile turrets. Elias worked beside her every step. She taught him the alien scripts of Vraxian command, and he taught her the steady rhythm of human patience, measuring twice before every weld, every shot. One evening, as they worked late into the night, Kareth paused, staring at the sparks showering from a plasma cutter. "You should not be here," she said quietly. "If I die, you lose everything." Elias didn't look up. "You think I'm going to sit inside while you do all the work?" "You don't know humans as well as you think," she smiled faintly. "No, I think I am only beginning to." Their eyes met for a moment, the hum of the forge filling the silence between them. The enemy within 3 days later. A drone fleet appeared in orbit. Scouts from the Vraxian Dominion. They hovered silently above the stratosphere, watching. But before any human could react, the colony's power grid went down. Lights flickered, shields collapsed, and comms went dark. "Sabotage," Kareth growled, slamming a console. Elias cursed. "How? We checked everything." A shadow moved in the doorway. Dr. Lin stepped forward slowly, her hands raised, eyes glinting unnaturally. "Because you didn't check me," she said in a voice that wasn't her own. Her skin shimmered for a moment, revealing flickers of chitin and bioluminescence. A Vraxian infiltrator, a mimic. Kareth's reflexes were lightning fast. She lunged, slamming the mimic against the wall. The creature hissed, its features shifting between Lin's face and that of a Vraxian spy. "You betray your own kind," Kareth snarled. The mimic laughed, a cold insectile sound. "No, Widow, you are the traitor. The Empire remembers." The Emperor remembers. A knife glinted, then blood. The mimic dropped to the floor, lifeless. Kareth stood above it, chest heaving. Elias placed a hand on her shoulder. "You okay?" Her voice trembled. "They're here. They've found us. The siege of New Elysium at dawn, the skies opened with thunder. The Vraxian fleet descended. 3 cruisers, 6 dropships, and a swarm of fighters that blotted out the stars." Elias stood at the command post, his hand steady on the controls. Kareth took her place at the main defense cannon, her alien armor reforged, her face set with purpose. "This is Kareth Rook of New Elysium," she transmitted across open frequency. "I am the Widow no longer. Withdraw your ships or I will send you to the void myself." A voice answered, deep, familiar, dripping with venom. "Kareth Vale, my former commander." "My disgrace." Her eyes widened. "Torek." Your mate, Elias said quietly. She nodded once. He should have died long ago, the voice laughed. You betrayed your bloodline for an ape. You wear their skin, eat their food, live among them. You will die with them. Maybe, she replied, her hands gripping the cannon. But you'll die first. The sky lit up with plasma fire. The battle for hours. The colony held the line. Kareth's rail cannons struck true, piercing Vraxian fighters one by one. Elias led ground troops through smoke and chaos, his mechanical arm crushing enemy drones. The colonists fought like humans always had, desperately, ferociously refusing to yield, but the Vraxians were endless. When the outer wall collapsed, Kareth ordered the fallback herself.
To the bunker.
Regroup! Elias stumbled, blood streaking his face. We can't hold much longer. Kareth activated her comm. Prepare the core charge. Elias froze. That'll destroy the entire colony. Yes, she said softly. But it will destroy them too. He grabbed her wrist. No, there's another way. She stared into his eyes and saw not fear, but faith, and for the first time she hesitated. The choice. The main power core hummed violently, ready to overload. Kareth's hands hovered over the detonator. Torak's voice echoed over the comms. You can still return, Kareth. The humans are weak. I will forgive your treason. Together, we will rebuild the Empire. She looked at Elias, bloodied, limping, still defiant. He was everything her empire wasn't. No, she said, tears in her eyes. I found something better. She slammed her palm against the console, but instead of detonating, the power redirected into the planetary shield. A surge of energy roared skyward, enveloping the colony in blinding light. Torak's fleet fired again, but their shots ricocheted harmlessly off the new barrier. Kareth turned to Elias, who grinned through his exhaustion. Told you there was another way. She laughed, a raw, beautiful sound that echoed through the bunker. The end of the Widow Torak's ship descended through the clouds, smoke trailing. He emerged from the wreckage, towering and furious, his armor burning red. Kareth! He roared. She met him in the open field, blade in hand. The colony watched as alien and alien clashed, sparks flying in the rain. Torak struck hard, but Kareth was faster. Every move she'd learned from humans, their improvisation, their unpredictability, became her weapon. You were my heart once, Torak bellowed. And you were my mistake, she hissed, driving her blade through his chest. He staggered, choking. You love them? She glanced back at Elias, who stood watching from the ridge. I love him. Torak fell to the ground, the rain washing away his blood. The Empire's warlord was dead, and in that silence, the widow's sins were finally washed clean. The new dawn days later, the colony began to rebuild. The surviving Vraxian soldiers, shamed by Torak's fall, surrendered to the humans. Kareth was summoned to Earth for judgment again, but this time, as an ally, Elias stood with her as she faced the United Terran Council. A human official spoke. Kareth Rook. Once known as the Widow of Vraxia, your actions have saved not only New Elysium but countless colonies beyond. What do you seek as reward? Kareth bowed her head. Forgiveness. And peace, the official smiled faintly. Both granted. That night, back on New Elysium, Elias and Kareth stood by the lake once more. The stars shimmered across the water like molten gold. Do you ever miss your world? Elias asked quietly. Kareth shook her head. No, because I found a new one. He slipped an arm around her waist. So what now? She smiled, her eyes glowing softly. Now we rebuild. Together. And as dawn rose over the horizon, the once feared widow of Vraxia stood beside a human she'd once sworn to destroy, now her greatest treasure, her home, her heart. The Hall of Judgment aboard the Vraxian Tribunal smelled of ozone and iron. Thousands of alien delegates stood in silence, their translucent skin reflecting the eerie blue light that poured down from the ceiling. At the center, a single figure knelt, her head bowed, her chains shimmering with energy pulses. They called her Kareth Val, the widow of Vraxia Prime. Once, she'd been a warlord, a commander of fleets, a destroyer of worlds. Her name had been whispered in fear across 14 systems. It was said that her voice alone could make lesser species tremble. But that was before the fall. Before the Treaty of Sol, before the humans came. Now, stripped of her armor and pride, she knelt before the tribunal, a symbol of power brought low. At the dais, High Chancellor Tzathvern, a being of ridged carapace and shimmering eyes, raised a clawed hand. Karethval, the voice echoed through translation fields. You stand guilty of the destruction of the Kolis moons, the enslavement of the Nara tribes, and the slaughter of human colonies during the expansion wars. The crowd hissed, clicked and murmured, a symphony of disdain. Kareth lifted her head. Her eyes, once glowing with crimson power, now burned with quiet defiance. Guilty, she said. As charged, the Chancellor's crest stiffened in disapproval. And yet you show no remorse. Remorse is for the dead, she replied, her voice low but steady. And I'm still breathing. The hall rippled with disapproval. The sentence had been decided even before she spoke. It was a formality, a performance for the masses. But then the Chancellor's next words silenced even the murmurs. By decree of the Tribunal, and under Article 12 of the Human-Vraxian Accord, your punishment shall be binding servitude to the human who lost the most in your war. A sharp intake of air followed. Even Kareth's stoic expression faltered. To a human? She whispered, disbelief breaking her tone. You would hand me over to one of them? The Chancellor's eyes flashed coldly. Yes, for all your conquests, all your pride, you will live among those you sought to destroy. Serve them. Learn humility from the species you called primitive. The guards hauled her up. She fought them on instinct, but the energy chains tightened, sending shocks through her nerves. Her knees buckled. Take her, the Chancellor commanded, and so began the fall of the Widow of Vraxia. The shuttle hummed quietly through hyperspace. Kareth sat alone in a reinforced containment pod, staring out at the void. The stars drifted by like cold witnesses. Humans. She had seen them in battle. Fragile things wrapped in metal shells, their lifespans a blink compared to hers. Yet somehow they had broken the Vraxian armada. Not through numbers, not through technology, but through will. The humans had refused to die, and now she was being delivered to one of them. To serve, to live as a slave. A punishment worse than death. The pod touched down on a green-blue planet. Air hissed as the hatch opened, and she was led out into the sunlight. It was a modest settlement, nestled between forests and mountains. Nothing like the gleaming cities of her kind. Waiting at the edge of the landing zone was a man in plain clothes. His name was Elias Rook, a former Marine, now retired to the colony world of New Elysium. His eyes were hard, the kind that had seen too much war. His left arm was mechanical, scarred from fusion burns. He didn't salute the Tribunal officers. Didn't even look at Kareth. Human Elias Rook, the Vraxian officer, intoned. As decreed by the Tribunal, the convict Kareth Vale is placed under your custody. She's bound to your service until the end of your natural life. Or hers. Elias finally turned. His gaze met Kareth's. For a long moment neither spoke. Then he said quietly, "Take the chains off." The officer blinked. "Human, she is dangerous." I said, "Take them off." Reluctantly, the officer pressed a code into a control pad. The energy bindings dissolved with a hiss. Kareth straightened slowly, her pride forcing her posture tall. Elias looked her over, then turned and began walking. "Come on, you're not sleeping in a cage." She stared after him, confused. "You pity me?" He didn't stop walking. "No, I just don't chain people. Not even enemies." His home was small, a cabin overlooking a lake, surrounded by trees that shimmered with bioluminescent veins under the twilight. Inside, everything was simple, functional, human. "Food's on the counter," Elias said. "You eat, you clean up after yourself. You don't touch my guns, and you don't leave the property without telling me. That's the deal." Kareth's voice dripped with disdain. "You believe you can order me like a pet?" He shrugged. "No, but I'm guessing you'll do whatever you want anyway." Her eyes narrowed. She expected fear, rage. Instead, she found indifference. That unsettled her more than hatred ever could. As night fell, Elias sat on the porch looking at the stars. Kareth stood behind him silently, her crimson eyes softening for the first time. "This planet," she said, "it's peaceful." "Yeah," he replied. "That's why I came here. I buried my wife and son on Earth after your war. I wanted somewhere quiet." Kareth froze. Her throat tightened. His wife, his son. The war she commanded had taken them, and now she was his sentence. Days became weeks. Kareth expected humiliation, rage, even violence. But Elias gave her space. He worked the land, hunted, repaired old machinery. He treated her like a person. When she tried to provoke him, he didn't rise to it. When she refused to eat, he left food by the door and walked away. The silence between them grew heavy, not hostile, but aching. One evening, as a storm rolled over the lake, Kareth found Elias cleaning an old rifle. "Why?" she asked suddenly. He looked up. "Why what? Why do you not hate me?" He sighed. "I did. For a long time, but hate's a fire. It burns everything around it. Eventually, it just leaves ash." She didn't understand at first. Her people glorified vengeance. It was honor. But this man had lost everything, and still, he refused to be cruel. For the first time in her long life, Kareth felt something strange. Shame. One night, she dreamed of the war. The screams, the burning ships, the children her fleets had condemned. She woke trembling, and for the first time she cried. Elias found her outside, staring at the lake. "They called you the widow," he said softly. "Because of your war?" She nodded. "Because I killed my mate to prove strength to my empire." Her voice cracked. "I believed mercy was weakness. I was wrong." Elias said nothing, just stood beside her. The rain fell softly around them. In the silence, something shifted between them. Not forgiveness. Not yet, but understanding. Weeks passed into months. Kareth began to work beside Elias. She helped repair the irrigation drones, learned to plant crops, even built a small forge from scrap metal. One morning, when a rogue droid malfunctioned and nearly exploded, she threw herself between it and Elias, taking the blast on her armorless body. When she woke in his arms hours later, bandaged and weak, Elias whispered, "You didn't have to do that." "I did," she murmured. "It's what humans call repaying a debt," he smiled faintly. "We usually just call it friendship." As time went on, the stars stopped feeling like a prison. The once feared widow of Vraxia began to laugh, awkward, low, but real. She even began to hum when she worked. One evening, sitting by the fire, Elias handed her a simple pendant, a small metallic disc etched with a human symbol. "What is this?" she asked. "It's called a wedding ring," he said. "It belonged to my wife. I figured you should have it." Her eyes widened. "Why would you give me something so precious?" He looked at her for a long moment. "Because it's a reminder. Even the worst pain can become something beautiful, if you let it." Kareth clutched the pendant, overwhelmed. For the first time in years, she smiled without pain, but peace is never permanent. One night, a Vraxian warship appeared in orbit. A transmission came through, an image of the Chancellor himself. "Kareth Val," he said coldly. "You have shamed the Empire long enough. Prepare for retrieval." Elias stood beside her, jaw tight. "They're not taking you," she turned to him. "If they do not, they will destroy this colony." He reached for his rifle. "Then they'll have to go through me." She smiled sadly. "You are a fool, human." "Yeah," he said, "but I'm your fool." The battle that followed was brutal. Elias led the colonists in defense while Kareth commandeered an old defense turret. For hours the sky burned. When the dust settled, the warship lay in ruins above the atmosphere, its wreckage burning through the night. Kareth collapsed beside Elias, both covered in soot and blood. "You fought for me," she whispered. He smiled weakly. "Guess I did." And then she said the words no one had ever heard from a Vraxian warlord before. "Elias Rook. My human. My treasure." That night, as dawn broke over the lake, the widow of Vraxia was no more. In her place stood Kareth Rook, the warrior who had found her redemption in the arms of the man she was sent to serve. And in the quiet of New Elysium, humanity had once again proven its greatest strength wasn't its weapons, but its heart.